Yeah, it's visible.
It is.
Yes, it is.
Great. All right. Thank you. So, as you all know, we are going to start a course on FHIR. FHIR is one of the latest standards. The reason why we call it as latest because it came into effect into usage a lot in the recent years, in the recent 2 3 years. Apparently, it started back in 2010, but the pace has caught up in the last 2 years specifically. So we'll see why and all reasons down the line during our course, which you will also understand slowly as and when we proceed. Uh, is my voice clear, guys? Or
Yes, it
Yes,
is clear.
we
okay?
can hear
Yeah,
good.
it's very clear.
All right, great. So we'll take a look at FHIR from basics, as it is new for every one of us. Even when I started working on FHIR back in 2016, when it was in the draft version, it was not even a fully published version of FHIRresources. It was very new. Understanding the concepts of FHIR was a complete change of what we used to know about HL7 version 2, right? So there are a lot of new concepts, new technology aspects are used in FHIR to uh, to uh, be in sync with the current IT industry in terms of digital healthcare. Okay, so we'll start about FHIR. Uh, we'll see what all things that we have as part of FHIR from zero, so that you guys can get enough knowledge and understand FHIR and also implement FHIR and also work with FHIR related resources, converting HL7 V2 messages to FHIR and all. Okay, we'll take a look at course curriculum on what we are going to cover. But before that, I think most of you know me. So my name is Dixon. I work as technical lead, technical architect in many projects, and I also work as a trainer. I like to teach. That's the reason I am in this teaching industry from the past few years. So as part of my experience in past 12 plus years, I have worked on various integration engines, various data standards like HL7, CCD, FHIR, uh, and integration engines like Mirth Connect, Rhapsody, integration engine, integration buddy, connector, and ensemble. So that's a little introduction about myself. Let's go ahead and see what we can get to know by the end of this session. Before that, we'll just quickly run through the curriculum so that you guys can have an overall idea of what we are going to cover in this particular training. Let me make it a little bit bigger. So when we start working on FHIR, these are
Can you give
few.
me that big computer on my
Sorry.
desk? Zuri, bring that plate of yours.
Hey, Otambo. Otambo,
I'm
can you?
sorry.
No problem. That's okay. Just if you can be on mute, that's really better. Okay, all right. So let us go ahead and look at the server requirements. This we will take a look at the things down the line. But prerequisites. So what are the prerequisites that we need in order to know about FHIR? We are anyways going to start from the basics. So prior knowledge of REST APIs and JSON will be an added advantage. But don't worry, who don't know it. I am going to explain about these two aspects as well in detail from scratch so that we can understand what is the REST API. Because HL7 V2 is not very much related to REST API, but when we jump into the REST API concepts with FHIR, there is a lot to it. So we'll go ahead and try to understand about that from basic. JSON is just the messaging structure, the way we have for HL7 V2, which is a pipe delimited message. Similarly, we have a specific format in which we exchange the data in the form of FHIR. So that is JSON. We'll talk about JSON structure as well. So as part of introduction, we'll see hospital workflow, what is the purpose of FHIR, why, what problem FHIR is solving in the current industry. We'll take a look at that, and we'll also talk about few use case scenarios, and then we'll see about where do we access FHIR, what all FHIR related resources we have. Unlike HL7 version 2, HL7 organization has done a very good job with FHIR regarding the material that it is providing. You have everything out there in the web, freely available material. You can go ahead and access it. But the problem is we need to know how to navigate through the website. So we will clearly go through how do we view or what perspective we have to have when we are looking at the website and how to navigate through the website. We'll take a look at that as well. Then in the upcoming sessions, we are going to see what is a resource. We'll have a basic introduction about the resource today, but in upcoming sessions, we'll see what is a patient resource. We'll just pick one of the resource and take a deeper look at it to understand what is its structure, what are the various things that we have as part of its structure. We'll have a lot of icons, we'll have a lot of data types. We'll take a look at all of them. And then next we will jump into REST, which is the other pair of hands for FHIR. If you talk about two pairs, or if you talk about two hands for FHIR, one hand is resources, the other hand is REST services. So both coordinate and work in sync with each other to go ahead and complete one solution. Okay, so we'll be talking about REST services in detail. What is REST? Why is it called as REST? What is REST API? What is API? And how FHIR uses this REST API technology, which is there in IT industry, to go ahead and exchange the data between different systems. Okay, so we'll take a look at that from basics, and we will also see how FHIR defines various types of interaction models that we have when we want to exchange the data between two different systems. And we will also see how to create a patient record, how to update a patient record using these REST services. All right. Once we discuss about the use case, that is when you will understand what we can do with FHIR, why we are creating the patient, or how to see how to create a patient or how to update a patient record can be done by us as well, in case if you want to. So that is how FHIR is flexible. So we'll talk about that down the line when we talk about REST services and all. And then we will jump into hands-on with other resources. So as an introduction, as I said, we'll start with one resource so that we can understand all the aspects of a resource, like patient resource and its referencing and its structure and icons and maturity levels and all. Once we understand everything about a resource, it's all about understanding other resources in all of those aspects. So it will be easier for us to relate it to each one of the other resources that we have. FHIR provides 150 plus resources. We cannot cover everything obviously, but we'll be covering most of them, most frequent ones, not most of them, sorry, most frequent ones that will be used in our healthcare industry today. All right, as part of that, we'll look at practitioner observation, medication statement, diagnostic report, appointment resource, and we'll talk about workflow using these resources. We'll be using a tool called clinFHIR, using which we can develop few functional scenarios and see how these resources are referenced with each other. Okay, so we'll talk about resource referencing more there. We'll use clinFHIR to have some graphical representation and also hands-on. Not only myself, you guys can also create your own functional scenarios. Like think of a patient going to hospital, understand what all resources are involved in his visit, and add them and see, have a graphical representation of what is how you use all the resources together. Okay, then we'll talk about bundle resources, one of the most important and mostly used resource. Okay, we'll talk about bundle resources in detail. Then we will also talk about other type of special resources that we have. I categorized it as special because they don't fall under the normal resources category. like contained resource, bundle resource, extensions, and resource lifecycle. So these are 4 concepts that we will look at in detail. And similar to HL7v2, we have data types in FHIR as well. So we'll talk about data types. By this time, we'll already be covering most of the data types as and when we encounter it about them about them while going through each of the resources. But still, we will try to cover the ones that we did not cover in the data type session. Okay. And then we will jump on to the concepts of terminology. Terminology is one of the important wing in FHIR or FHIR specification. Terminologies will help us to maintain all the codes that we have. We had in HL7v2 training, we looked at ICD codes, CPT codes, Loinic codes. We did not talk about Loinic codes. We'll talk about Loinic codes here. But we have these libraries, right? SNOMED codes, CPT codes, ICD codes. All of these codes are managed by one single server that is called as a terminology server. And that terminology server will provide its services. So we'll talk about that terminology server, how to deal with the terminology server, how validations can happen with terminology server, what all various ways you can interact with the terminology server. All of these aspects regarding to terminology will be covered under terminology. Okay. And once we complete terminology, we'll be equipped with all that we need to go ahead and understand what is a resource, how to interact with a resource, how to exchange data, creating record, updating, deleting, all of these things will be covered by now. Okay, so using that knowledge, our work is to go ahead and convert an HL7v2 message to a FHIR resource. This is one of the most common and frequent use case that is there in the industry right now, because HL7v2 messages and interfaces are all over the world, but FHIR is booming up now, right? Or it is in budding stages, and we will have the requirement of converting the HL7 messages v2 to FHIR resources. So we'll go ahead and see how to do that. There are various methodologies of how you can do it, because FHIR is all about REST APIs, which is an existing technology, very well fully developed in scope of IT. Okay, so there are many ways of how you can do it. You can have Java code, you can have .NET code, you can use integration engines. As we are not hardcore developers, we won't be looking at it from the developing perspective of a Java developer or a .NET developer. We'll be using our merge integration engine to convert an HL7v2 message to FHIR. Okay, we'll see the process from the scratch. How do you go ahead and interpret the message? What is the merge architecture? What all the things that we have as part of merge architecture? And how do we create a JSON object and post it to the FHIR server? So we'll have a live patient creation. Let's say that you receive an ADT message. An ADT patient will be created in the FHIR repository. So we'll be using Happy FHIR server, which is a publicly available server, which will go ahead and save the data in their database whenever you want to create a patient record. So we'll do that cycle where we'll just provide an ADT message to our integration engine, and integration engine will go ahead and create a patient record for us. So we will practically implement that during our B2 to FHIR training. And after that, we have something called as conformance and profiling. Conformance and profiling will help us to go ahead and create profiles and manage those profiles. Conformance is nothing but when you want to go ahead and create resources, or when you want to modify the resources, you will use the concept of conformance so that you can be in sync with FHIR specification and don't deviate from that. Okay, so we'll talk in detail about conformance and profiling. We'll see what is capability statement, what is structure definition, what is implementation guide, what is profiling and all. And then we'll jump into the concepts of certification. So there are a list of topics that you have to go through certification. We'll see how you can achieve your certification. We'll take a look at I'll share a few sample questions with you. I have one sample paper which has about 20 questions, which will help you to go ahead and understand what will be the questioning format and all regarding preparation for certification. Again, I just want to highlight one point. Training is a kind of coaching. When you really want to go for certification, this coaching will help you to go ahead and prepare for your certification. You will be under impression that as soon as we are done with training, we can attend the certification and get certified. Uh, it's not like that. We have to, it's a coaching and there is a thorough preparation that is necessary at least for 1.5 months or 2 months to go through all the topics that you have and then give an attempt for certification exam. Okay, I just wanted to highlight that point so that we don't be under wrong impression. But down the line, we will talk more about certification aspects when we get there. Okay, so this is the high-level overview of the entire course. Let us go ahead and get started with today's session. Someone has a question. Let's see. FHIR's shorthand sushi. I am not sure what sushi is. We'll talk about that at the end.
Okay.
All right. So let us see by the end of today's session, we will see what is FHIR, where do we use it, how the name has arrived, and what is history of FHIR. I mean, from standard perspective. So the basic hospital workflow, we are all already aware of how the basic things work in the hospital, right? When a patient visits the hospital, he will talk to the receptionist if he is coming there for the first time. If he is visiting the hospital for the first time, he'll get himself registered, and all the data that is being registered is called as demographic information. Okay, and once demographic information is captured, the receptionist will ask the patient what is the if you want to go ahead and create an appointment, which doctor you want to meet, and all of those details, and they will schedule an appointment with specific doctor, right? And whenever this data is being captured in the PM system, data will be sent over to the EHR system as well, which is an application sitting at provider's desk. Then patient will meet the doctor. He will discuss with the doctor about his problem and all. And if doctor is able to determine the issue just by looking at the patient symptoms and all, well and good. If he is unable to do that, then he will place a lab order, and this lab order information will flow from the EHR application to the lab application in the electronic form, right? And lab results will be sent back to the EHR system. By looking at the results, doctor will be able to determine what is the problem that the patient has, and finally he will go ahead and prescribe a medicine or prescribe the treatment, further treatment, whatever has to be done. So this is our general hospital workflow. And finally, all the charges that we have with respect to patient record or with respect to the labs or any services that were provided within the hospital, these all will flow back to the receptionist desk so that they can go ahead and generate a claim and send it to the insurance company, right? So here we can see that we have data flowing into the EHR from all the sites. Receptionist is sending demographic information, appointment related, encounter related information to the EHR system. Labs are sending order related, result related information back to the EHR system. Providers are updating their data, capturing vitals, updating their information, everything into the EHR system. And there is an interaction with pharmacy as well, where medicines are provided, medications are given, or medications might be administered within the hospital itself if it is an outpatient clinic. If it is an inpatient clinic, we may have daily trial of what is happening with the patient and all. But at the end of the day, all the data is present in the EHR, right? And EHR has become the central repository to go ahead and have entire clinical history of the patient. But apparently with all these EHR systems, we do not have one solution that can have a patient access his own data. When EHR is holding the data, that particular hospital owns that data and they don't share it with anyone basically in real time, right? Let's say you go to any hospital and they give you a paper or something, but you won't get the digital form of it, right? This problem was tried to be solved by usage of patient portal and something like that in the past, but it was not. It was good. Patient portal and all was good, but not to the extent where they can have access to their entire data. Okay, so apparently patient is the center of all of these things, but unfortunately he did not have access to his own data, which he should actually, right? Whenever someone, if I want to take a look at my history, unfortunately I don't have access to that, right? That problem is solved by FHIR. How FHIR solves that problem? Let's take a look at that. So when the entire data is being sent to the EHR system, EHR is already storing that information in its own database, right? And EHR is having that info, but is not exposed to the outside world. Sorry, but it is not exposed to the outside world. So what FHIR as a standard does is, this is just one of the solutions that FHIR provides. It will be very easy for us to relate. That's the reason I have taken this example. Down the line, in tomorrow's session, in upcoming sessions, we'll see what all other solutions FHIR can provide. Okay, but this is one of the famous solutions that can be solved in today's world. So whenever the data is being saved in the EHR database, it is not accessible by the patient, as I said, because hospital is restricting the data to the there within the hospital, and they don't give access to it to their own database to the outside world. So what FHIR does is, you can have a layer of FHIR added on top of your database, and FHIR incorporates all the security aspects, all the data exchanging mechanisms, data standard that you have to use in order to exchange the data, and have the data exposed to the outside world, so that outside companies or outside world can develop mobile apps, develop your desktop apps if you want, and then have them as a solution provided to the patient, so that patient can have access to his own data. Okay, that is how FHIR has solved one of the greatest problems that we had within healthcare industry by providing this solution. We usually call this as a FHIR facade solution, because we are just adding a layer of FHIR on top of the data that we already have. Okay, and oh man, oh, this is not on mute. Bhupinder, can you be on mute if you don't mind? Okay, thank you. So that is how FHIR as a bigger aspect, FHIR solves that one of the major problems that we have in the current world industry. So data, basically, it is exchanging, or it is basically exposing the data that is there within EHR. Of course, there are security measures who can access the data, how they can access the data, and what all protocols they have to follow in order to access the data. If he's a patient, it doesn't mean that he will go ahead and have access to the entire data that is present in EHR. They will have all the security measures in place, and those security measures will help us to go ahead and make sure if a certain person is entitled to his own data, he will be able to see only his data. Okay, all of that can be managed through during the development process of developing an application with the help of FHIR. Okay, so someone has a question. Yeah, Vinith, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi Dixon. So I had a question here. Well, I was working with Allscripts, and during that time, they had the database, the EHR database. All the data was dumped into their database. However, they had access to the handheld devices, and the same data used to reflect on the handheld devices as well. But they did not use FHIR then. So
Right.
if that was possible, then why are we even incorporating a different layer where this could be easily be possible by directly accessing the data from the database?
Good question. Good question. So you're talking about enterprise solution or pro solution with
Enterprise solution.
enterprise solution. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a situation back in 2016 or 2017.
Right. Correct. Exactly.
They started Allscripts developer program and all.
Yes.
So apparently at that time, FHIR was in nascent stages. So they used their own structure, but also mentioned more about the concept of moving to FHIRresources down the line. Right now, Allscripts is also using the FHIRstandard itself, and they are in process of development of R4resources and something, if I'm not wrong. But the thing, to answer your question precisely, if everyone develops, not that a solution cannot be provided, they have developed their own APIs to go ahead and expose the data that they have to the outside world. Okay, but moving to a standard will help us to go ahead and have one specific structure being followed by everyone in the world, so that we don't keep reinventing the wheel. Okay, if Cerner develops their own APIs, Allscripts develop their own APIs, and Epic develops their own APIs, each one of will have their own API structure or the message structure within that API, right? And the accessing mechanism for each one of them will be different. And if I, as a mobile developer, if I want to go ahead and develop a mobile app for these three individual EHR systems, I have to develop one each for each one of them, right? But if FHIR is in place as a standard, and if all the EHRs are following this standard of FHIR, I can develop one single app for all of them and have it deployed to all the different EHRs. So that's the whole purpose of having a standard in place. So to bring that uniqueness and that standardness within the healthcare industry, we have this FHIR coming up.
Okay.
Okay, not that it cannot be done. It can be done. Standards will help us to go ahead and have a uniformity through the entire industry. And this FHIR is all about that particular standardness.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. So let us go ahead and jump into question, why FHIR? So apparently we already had a data standard version 2, version 3, and then we also had CDA, which is clinical document architecture, which is another standard. We also had X12 to exchange the data with insurance companies and all. But why do we need FHIR? Is it really necessary? So V2 has been modeled, or V3 has been modeled back in 1980s, 1990s, when they felt that we have to exchange data between different systems. So eventually it is inevitable that data exchange has to happen between two different systems. We cannot avoid it. Then the designers thought that how do we implement this data exchange? If everyone does it their own way, then everyone will end up in doing the same work repeatedly by allocating more time to it and spending more time on it. That is when we have emerged with standard of HL7 V2, right? But it was solving the problems that they had at that point of time back in 1980s, 1990s, right? But as and when we proceeded into the future, a lot of things changed. We had a lot of wearable technologies like our Fitbit or Google Watch, which is capturing a lot of your data, and like your vitals, heart rate, and there are many different machines which we can wear and get a lot of information about our health data. And you are having mobiles now, and all of these problems or data uh, could not be captured with HL7v2. The purpose of HL7v2 or HL7v3 or CDA was totally different. It was restricted more on hospital side. Exchange of data between hospital and labs and insurances used to happen through HL7v2 or v3 or CDA, right? And everything was revolving around the solutions that are provided by the hospitals in terms of data exchange. But in 2010, people realized that we have to have new technologies incorporated into healthcare data exchange, area, and that is when they have started discussing about how well we can come up with a new standard that can solve a lot of problems that we have with past standards like V2, V3, and CDA, as well as provide futuristic solutions in terms of data exchange in healthcare that is going to come up in the future. Okay, so as I said, V2, V3 and all did not provide or did not solve the problem. One of the major one is the solution that we discussed just now. V2 is an event-based transaction where an event happens in the front end and the data will be sent to the downline systems. And it is exchanging only a small set of data, right? The patient got registered, only registration information will be flowing from PM to EHR. So that is completely an event-based related transaction. And with V2, you cannot go ahead and develop a mobile app. You won't be able to get the data in V2 format or do something else with just V2 with the latest needs that we have. That's when they have realized that need for real-time data access is necessary, and it is increasing day by day. Patient engagement was one of the main requirement that US government has set, stating that patient should also have access to the data, to his own data. Apparently, we did not have a proper solution back then in 2010. Okay, and there is a lot that is going in terms of mobile developments and wearable technology, as I just mentioned. And all of these solutions cannot be leveraged in healthcare industry because we do not have that particular standard which can do that particular work. And obviously there is a vast increase in data as we have moved digital from paperwork. There is a lot of data that is being stored with respect to healthcare, right? If we go back and ask, if you call me and ask me today, can you get me the file that you had in 2010? It is impossible for me to get that right now. But if as the data is being stored in digital form right now, it's very easy, and the data is always available within the HR systems. But accessibility is zero. That is another problem why we needed a new standard. So HL7 as an organization has thought that we should have a new standard or new solution that can solve all of these problems that we had with past standards, and also develop new solutions. And that is when they have started developing FHIR as a draft version, and by using the new modern web approaches with keeping all of these things in mind, specifically mobile development technologies, mobile development and patient facing app technologies. Okay, so when they are developing it, they kept few things in mind. They have done a lot of brainstorming, and they have come up with an idea that we'll take best practices from what we had from the past experience. Experience matters a lot, right? When HL7 has decided that we'll go with this, they took all the good aspects of the past standards that we have, HL7v2, HL7v3, CDA, and all. Not that these are not successful. HL7v2 is the most successful standard that we have out there, right? And HL7v3, it has laid the background, or you can say that some sort of push-up for FHIR in designing the structure. CDA is one of the other standard which is most successful out there, right? So they have taken all the best practices of all of these standards and added it with the latest web service technologies that we have in the current IT industry, and developed this FHIR solution. Okay, and all the mistakes that were done in the past with various standards have also been considered, so that they make sure that we don't make the same mistakes again in FHIR. The documentation is one of the core uh, learning that we have implemented, that HL7 has implemented with FHIR. Okay, so that's the reason why we have robust documentation with FHIR. You won't imagine, you can't imagine how much we have within FHIR website. You have examples, you have crystal clear documentation on what each of these concepts are, documentation regarding data types included with scenarios, and they made it community driven. Earlier it was not community driven. It was, but not to the extent of what we have today with FHIR. Okay, so that people can contribute to the documentation, people can contribute to contribute with examples, and they can also be part of developing FHIR, or evolving or improving FHIR day by day. Okay, so what is FHIR? We are talking about FHIR. What is FHIR? So FHIR stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. So I've highlighted the word resource just to catch your eyes on there. Resources is something the entire FHIR specification will revolve around. So we'll talk what is a resource down the line. But other three terms, fast healthcare interoperability resources. Interoperability is nothing but, as we all know, when two apps can talk to each other, they are said to be interoperable with each other. FHIR resources will help you to go ahead and have your EHR system talk with other external devices like mobile apps and external desktop applications and so on. And as we are in healthcare, as we are talking about healthcare specification, we have the term healthcare. Why do we have fast? That is one of the most frequent questions that I get. Why do we say it as fast? Apparently, with HL7 V2, V3, and CDA, you don't have computable implementation. Let's say, what do I mean by that? Let's say you are developing a FHIR resource. Let's say you are developing a HL7 V2 interface. You have to develop your own profile, which is nothing but to create your own messaging structure from HL7. By taking the HL7 standard structure, you'll be creating your own HL7 V2 message structure, right? And you have to write the code from scratch for that particular structure on how the validation should happen. Let's say that your message says, I want a message, I want PID, I want PV1. This is your profile. How do you do that? How do you validate that? You have to write a schema. You have to go ahead and develop a program to go ahead and run through those validations. Okay, which is a lot of time consuming process. Writing a schema and developing a code to pass through that schema is not a thing. Okay, but whereas with FHIR, you have the schema readily available. That is where the term fast comes into play. For every resource, for every implementation that you have computable schema ready, which you can just grab and have your resource validations done just like that within few minutes. All that you have to do is generate a proper resource or proper message. In order to say resource, I'm representing a message. All that I have to do is construct a proper message and make readily available computable solutions present out there, which will make my implementations way more faster than what I used to do with V2 and V3. Okay, understanding the resources, understanding the REST API, understanding the standard might take time. Implementation will not take a lot of time. That's the reason why we call it as fast healthcare interoperability resources. Okay, and FHIR uses latest technologies of REST APIs. So as we all know, REST APIs are the exchanging methodologies that we use to exchange data between different applications. We'll talk about REST APIs more down the line. And FHIR consists of resources. We'll see what resources are as well. And entire healthcare data can be transacted in the form of resources with FHIR. Okay, so let's quickly have a snapshot of the standards that were evolved from the past till date. Okay, so back in 1980s, as I mentioned earlier, we had HL7V2, which emerged as a standard, and slowly we had V2.5, where corrections to V3 were made, and corrections for V2 were made and released. And then later we had standards released in 2005 with HL7V3 and CDA. But apparently FHIR started to evolve, right, starting from 2010. So it started in 2010 until 2016. They were drafting, writing, creating the various resources, discussing about the conceptual aspects of how FHIR should look like and all. And in 2019, they have released R4 version. R4 version is one of the uh, most frequently or mostly used versions today. Okay, we are not using R3 and past standards anymore. R3 is nothing but they call it a standard for trial use. As you can see, STU, R3, R2 and all are mentioned as STUs, which means they are the draft versions of the standard used for trial purposes. But R4 is released as one of the normative version. What is normative and all, we'll take a look at that down the line, but you can say that just consider or assume that it is a standard version of FHIR. R5 is coming around the corner. You may have it by end of this year or beginning of next year. There are discussions going around when we have to release. There are problems around releasing it. So there is a lot of discussion going around in the community on whether they have to release now or in the future, how they want to release it and all. So there are uh, a lot of aspects to it, whether they have to release or not. So FHIR comes in 4 flavors. So we call it as 4 paradigms of FHIR. Okay. So you can assume that these are 4 sections of it. First one is REST APIs, how you can exchange FHIR data with the help of REST APIs. Apart from that, REST APIs is the one which we will mostly concentrate on and which we'll be learning. Even the industry and the community is currently driven with REST APIs. But there are other sides to it as well, like documents. You can exchange, you can develop document related interfaces with the help of FHIR. You can also develop or replace V2 messaging, V3 messaging with the help of FHIR. And you have something called as services, which are also another part of FHIR. Okay, but our concentration will be mainly on REST APIs. How V2, V3 and CDS will be transacted and all. I'll give you an overview of these things when we talk about after completing all the FHIR related REST API transactions and all. So now we were talking about resources a lot, right? So let us go ahead and jump and see what is a resource. So what is a resource basically? We are talking about resource, FHIR and all. And I also told you that everything within healthcare industry in terms of FHIR will revolve around resources. So a resource is the basic building block of FHIR. You can consider a wall and that wall has many bricks to it, right? Each brick plays a major role. Even if you don't have one brick, the wall cannot be completed, right? In the same way, in FHIR, you can assume that each resource has a brick and it will focus mainly on smallest amount of data that makes a meaningful sense. Okay, you can call a resource as building block of FHIR and it has some data organized together to become the smallest unit of information that makes a meaningful sense. For example, patient got registered and his patient information will be collated together like his name, date of birth, gender, SSN and all. And all of this can be combined and it can be called as one resource. patient's appointment information can be combined together and you can call it as one resource. I told you, right, we have good practices of V2 and V3 and the old standards were taken up and they are used in FHIR. You can correlate this with one segment each in the V2 message. If any one of you do not have idea about V2, you can ignore this point. But if you have idea about versioning 2 of HL7, we have segments there, right? Each segment can be considered or can be correlated to one resource. Okay, not all of them, but the perspective is that was one of the concepts that were borrowed from the old standards that we have. Okay, and for people who do not have idea about V2, you can assume that if one resource is kind of a form that you get. Let's say you go to the hospital and they will give you a form to fill up all the details, or when you are applying for any government job, or when you apply for any other uh, military related jobs or anything as such, you will get a form, right? An empty form which indicates what is your name, which will ask you what is your name, what is your date of birth, and what is your gender, and what is your address, email address, and all, right? This empty form is called as a resource. You can assume it that way. Okay. If you're going to hospital, you'll get a form for patient information. You will get another form for insurance information. You will get another form for guarantor information. So we have ended up in having 3 different forms. Each form represents certain highly focused data. Right? First form, you have patient information, and it holds only patient information. And if you talk about the insurance form, it will hold insurance information. If you separate these two, then there are 2 different highly focused data sets, right? And each of these forms can be considered as one resource. So in that way, you will end up in having many number of forms, which we are calling it as resources. Okay, patient resource. Then you have allergy resource. Then you have prescription resource. Then you have insurance resource. In this way, we'll end up in having a lot of resources. Entire data set that we have within the hospital, or entire data set that gets generated when the patient visits the hospital, is divided into small data sets, and each data set has a certain name, and each data set is called as a resource. Okay, so one individual resource, if you just separate one individual resource, it may not make a lot of sense. But when you combine resources together, that is when it will give you a useful clinical information. You take patient resource and see, if you just let's say that you have 10 forms together. If you just pull out one of the form which gives you order information, will you be able to determine, or will you be able to have a meaningful clinical record? You will just feel that this is just an order of a patient and this is giving you some information, but for which patient it is given, for which appointment it has been given, who is the doctor, all of this information will not be present in that order form, right? When you combine all the forms together, that is when you will get, it will form a meaningful information. Okay, so in a nutshell, one resource might not give you a lot of information, but when you combine multiple resources together, it will form one meaningful data set. It will give you information, but it is very minimal information that you will get. If you look at an insurance form, you will understand that this is insurance of some person, but which person it is, for that you have to combine it with a patient resource. So patient resource and then the insurance resource, both together will give you some information in a proper way, in an understanding way. Yeah. So we have a patient information and this is the insurance that belongs to the patient. Okay. So how are these resources present? So the solutions that we have seen in the past about the FHIR facade solution or FHIR layer that we have that I have shown you in the in the initial solution screen. That is one of the solutions. In another way, resources can be saved into a database. Okay, and they can go ahead and you can go ahead and create the resources which can be saved to the database. You can go ahead and update them. You can go ahead and delete them if you want to. Okay, but apparently where do they stay? They always stay in the database, and they are saved in the database separately if you want to. Okay, we'll talk more about resource existence down the line when we talk about resource instances and resource references and all. Okay, one important term here that we need to understand is resource instance. So what is a resource instance? Now we have understood that we have resource. A resource is nothing but highly focused data which will gather some data elements together. But apparently when you look at a form, your form is just an empty form. It is just a template. But when you fill in your data in that form, it will become an instance, right? So a resource instance is nothing but a filled out form is called as an instance. An empty form is called as a template. Okay. So when you're saving the data to a FHIR repository, you'll have a lot of resource instances saved because you are filling up the data within that resource and then saving it to the database. We'll see it down the line. What is an instance when we actually call out a record or when we actually create a patient record. We are having the process of creating the patient record and all. We'll be seeing down the line how do we go ahead and create a JSON structure for a patient resource, and then we will use public server to go ahead and create that particular resource in the destination server. Okay, so if you look at the patient resource, how does it look like? I know we are taking a little bit more time. It will take another 10 minutes. I hope that's okay for you guys. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So when you look at a patient resource, as I said, how does it look like? The message structure that you are seeing on the screen right now is the way the patient resource will look like. It is a JSON structure. So usually whenever you have any set of data, the data can be exchanged in certain format. If you talk about HL7 V2 messages, we have pipe delimited message structure, which will be used to transact data between one system to another. In the same way, whenever we are using FHIRstandard, you can transact the data in 3 different forms: HL7, JSON, and Turtle. I have zero knowledge about Turtle because I have never used it. I heard it only with HL7 FHIR. But XML and JSON, this is something that we have used. We have been using it with many other interfaces as well. So JSON is the most famous used structure when compared to XML and JSON with REST APIs and all. Okay, so the current window that you're seeing here right now is expressing the patient resource in the form of a JSON structure. So we'll talk about JSON structure down the line. If someone is new to JSON structure and all, we'll just have a quick note or quick overview of what a JSON structure is. But any resource will have these 4 sections of data. Okay, each color represents one section, and you will have, we'll talk more about these 4 sections in tomorrow's session. Okay, there is a lot of understanding behind the scenes to understand what is base resource, what is domain resource, and what is a resource. Okay, but apparently right now I want you to concentrate on the bottom one, where you are having patient's identifier, which is nothing but patient ID, patient name, what is his family name, what is his given name, and whether it is an official name or a normal name, like the pet name or nickname that we use at home, what is his phone number, what is his gender, what is his birth date, and various other data elements are there for within a resource. So the bottom one that you are seeing here is called as a resource, and it has the standard information pertaining to one patient. This is a patient resource that we are seeing. Okay. Next, we'll talk about resource structure as well in tomorrow's session, once we understand all of these base resource and domain resource concepts. So let's go to our FHIR specification website to understand how the website is designed, and then we will come back to the questions. So HL7 has done a wonderful work with the documentation. When we go to FHIR website, you can go to this resources section. And when you go to resources section, we can start our learning from here. In this resource section, you can see all the list of resources that are available. And you have various views that you can make use of. You have category, you have alphabet, you have auto layout, and so on. But categorized is the best view because it will categorize the resources from functional aspect. These are called as foundational resources, and these are called as base resources. And then you have clinical related resources, financial related resources, and specialized resources. Okay. Base resources are the one which will help us to go ahead and manage the administration aspects of it, like patient resource, practitioner is nothing but the doctor information resource, and then you have organization resource, and then you have encounter resource, appointment resource. So all of these are admin related resources, right? So those are called as base resources. Okay. So right now we don't want to go with each one of them because it will we may be confused. So we'll focus on one resource and we'll understand the concepts revolving around that one resource. Once we understand that, it's nothing but to replicate the same concept with other resources. Okay, so we'll start with one resource, which is patient resource, understand in detail about patient resource, and automatically we'll be able to figure out rest of them. Okay, so when I clicked on patient resource, it took me to the patient resource section, and within this section, it is telling me what all data elements will be involved in this resource. So what is a resource? As I said in the beginning, it is a combination of all the data elements of certain category. So when we're talking about patient, we will have all the elements pertaining to that patient. Okay, we call these as elements. In HL7 V2, we call each, within each segment, we have fields, right? In the same way, we have elements here. Okay, so we have identifier element, we have name element, we have telecom, we have gender. So all of these resources have, this entire resource has the information with respect to patient in the form of individual elements. Okay, and within this documentation, you also have a sample XML structure, sample JSON structure, and also sample turtle structure. These are three formats in which data exchange is possible using FHIR. Okay, so in tomorrow's session, we'll take a deeper look at this page. This page is just one single page, but there is a lot of information present here. Each of these icons play a major role in understanding the resource element. Each of these icons have a lot of meaning. This cardinality is used a lot in FHIR, and these data types will define the data structure of each of these elements, how they are done. We have to take a look at each one of them to understand that better. And description, we may be ignoring description in HL7 V2. Even here, the description of each of these elements will give us a lot of information of what that particular element is all about, right? So understanding all of this itself will take 3-4 hours of time for us. So in our next upcoming sessions, we are going to take a look at patient resource and focus our everything focus our everything on it to understand all the concepts revolving around this. Okay, so we will conclude today's session here. We'll continue with patient resource tomorrow and understand the resource concepts in detail. Okay, so I'll open up for questions. So any one of you have any questions, we can go ahead and discuss those questions. Yeah,
Dixon, I have a question. Yeah. So this was for the architecture. When we say that there's a layer of FHIR, and then we extend our information or the data that is stored into the EHR to FHIR database and so on and so forth downstream on the handheld devices. My question was, is it so that in the nearby future there we can just drop down the EHR database or migrate the information from EHR database to a FHIR server or something, and just do not use EHR? Then let's just use the FHIR server. Is there a possibility like that?
Good question. Possible, but it is a
Not
preference.
feasible. Okay.
It is feasible. It is 100% feasible, but it is a preference. So now you will see that healthcare data is very, very very confidential, right? So enterprise hospitals may not prefer to go ahead and expose the data just like that from their base database that they have. Okay, they might want to go ahead and have their separate on-premise data set solution with them itself and expose the data only which they want to go ahead and expose. Here, they may not be interested in exposing everything, but most of the information as per their government rules and regulations. Okay,
Right.
so in such situations, they will go for having a separate FHIR repository, which can have all the resources in the form of, all the data sets in the form of FHIR resources being stored somewhere, but still have their own EHR. Okay, you can have the entire backend repository as FHIR repository and develop a full-fledged EHR application. That is possible. Okay, we may change it, but it's a preference again, as I said. And another thing is, EHRs don't need to be online 24/7, right? But FHIR, if you are saying that I am FHIR compliant and my applications, my database is always available to you, then hospitals have to take care of exposing the data 24/7, right? Or else mobile applications will not work. Even in that scenario, they would prefer to have FHIR repository as a separate repository being on cloud somewhere, but still have their own data set with them in the form of EHR.
Okay.
It's just a preference. We may see that in future. We don't know.
Okay. So thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone?
I don't know if I can stay later and talk to Shrivana after the course.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can individually contact Srinivas, Claude. No problem. You can just ping him on WhatsApp. And
Oh, okay. That's right. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we'll conclude today's session here. So we'll have this session spread over 4 to 5 weeks. We'll have 24 to 28 hours of sessions covering all the concepts. We'll have it at this time only every day at 8 a.m. Indian time. We'll also communicate about it in the US time. So you can join tomorrow's session as well without any issues. But to continue further, you may have to register and you can contact Srinivas. So whoever is interested, they can provide their numbers tomorrow and we can continue from there. So whoever has introduced in the beginning, they can drop. Whoever joined later, if you guys can stay back, we can have a quick talk and we can conclude today's session.
I'm sorry. Did you say the people you introduced can stay or?
Can drop. People
Okay,
who
I can
introduced
drop, right?
can. Yes, yes, you can. You can, Claude.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Dixon.
Bye-bye. I think Lee and Vinit joined later. So, hey Lee, hi. Lee, are you there? Okay. Hey Vinit, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey Vinit, hi. Hi. How are you?
I'm good, Dixon. How are you?
Great, great. I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. So, Lee, we just had a quick round of introduction in the beginning. So, I was just looking for what is your background, if you have worked in healthcare before, and what exactly you are looking for in
Okay.
from this training.
Right. So, Dixon, I have somewhere around 9.5 years of experience now, almost 10. Majority of being into the healthcare industry. I've been working with Allscripts extensively with their interfaces, implementations, great exposure to HL7 V2. I had taken study documents the last time from you guys, but I did not attend the sessions because the study documents itself helped me a lot, the HL7 and Word documents. So I was able to go ahead and accomplish what I wanted to. I have started working as a product owner now. This is the first time that I'll be working with FHIR. So I have gone through the documents, the FHIR Bible, as I say. I have gone through resources, and but it's just that I wanted to know in depth about how FHIR works, and I had some basic like for example how V2 is crystal clear. I wanted that to happen with FHIR as well. So my basic look for from this training would be having a crystal understanding of FHIR architecture, how the messages crosses over, the structure of the messages. Like for example, if there were V2, there were segments. So what are we looking for here? How do we read that? How do we parse that? So that's my approach. And yes, there is one major approach, the FHIR shorthand, and there is a software also related to it known as Sushi. It is used for creating implementation guides, which later can be used for data profiling and validations.
Correct.
So that is my major project. So I was wondering if I can get some knowledge on that, which will help me downstream, or when I start working on my projects.
Okay. I did not hear about Sushi.
Okay.
So basically, you have many tools out there which will help you to manage implementation guides or profiling. For example, Forge will help you to create your own profile. How to create and get the structured definition of that particular profile as well. So in that way, there are many tools out there. But we will be having a generic view, and for each aspect, we'll be seeing one or the other tool to understand. For example, to understand about resource references and all, we'll be taking support of clinFHIR to understand, have a graphical representation of how resources are interconnected with each other. In the same way, we'll be using Forge to create extensions. How do we create an extension, and how do we add it to our existing resource? How do we create a profile using Forge? We'll see that. And but yeah, we'll be covering most of the things. Not very specific tool that you mentioned. No, we are not going to use Sushi. But you will definitely get an idea. If you learn one tool, you will be able to understand other tools as well, right? So we'll have that approach.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah. All right, Vinith, thanks for that introduction. So you are still working with Allscripts?
No, now I've started working with Roche.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Lee, are you there?
Hi, Dixon.
Hey, Umair. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Thanks. I'm good.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, Umair.
For this session, is there any link for for that can provide me the details of this training session overall?
You mean the recording of today's session, or?
Yeah, recording and that can provide me a kind of a brochure type of thing, because I received this link from one of my colleagues.
Oh, okay.
He just forwarded this Zoom link to me on Skype, and that's why I joined it.
Okay. Yeah, we can send it. Can you drop your email address and phone number in the chat?
Yes, sure. Yes.
Just drop it. We will go ahead and pick it up and we'll send it.
Sure.
Srinivas is the administrator. He will coordinate everything. So you will receive an email from him with all the details.
Okay, let me send my email and phone.
Guys, I need to drop. Thank you.
Yeah,
Will it be
go ahead.
Thank you
a
so much.
1 hour session daily?
Yes,
At
it
the
will be
same
1
time?
hour session. Right.
8
Correct.
to 9.
1 hour session is 8 to 9.
Okay. All right. And what are the brochure will provide me the information. What is the cost for
Yes,
this?
yes. Cost and all, you can talk individually with Srinivas. But if you have any other questions relating the course, you can ask me. I will help you.
Okay, sure. I've dropped the email and phone number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Did you drop that in the chat?
Yeah, I sent it directly to Srinivas.
Srinivas. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Then that's great. All right.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll talk tomorrow. Thank
Tomorrow.
you.
Bye.